Hi, and welcome to One Simple Recipe, where we hope to get you one step closer to better health. Thanks for joining today. Today we are continuing with our tofu, and today it's all about pan-seared tofu with a sticky glaze. So stick around. I'm Judy Mateski. I'm a registered dietitian and a licensed nutritionist with Athens Nutrition. So thanks for joining today. We are spending a little bit talking about tofu. Last week we crumbled it up and we created this amazing eggless egg salad. Today we're going to use it in a different way, a little different method. We're going to pan-sear it, so hopefully we're going to create a little bit of a crispy texture to it, and then we're going to finish it with a little glaze. All right, so let's get started. We are using tofu, and I'm assuming most of you are probably familiar with it. Tofu is basically it's soy milk that is coagulated with some agents that create almost like a tofu cheese in a way. Very, very mild in flavor, pretty neutral. So it sort of takes on any flavor that you're using as far as seasoning. I'm using a firm tofu. I already removed it from its water bath and drained it. Extra firm would be great because when you're trying to pan-sear tofu, you really want to make sure that you have it pretty on the drier side, because the moisture is going to, cause it to steam rather than sear if you want to try to get that sort of crispy edge. So extra firm has a little less water in it, firm a little more, but firm or extra firm can work. I had it sitting here. I just happen to have this cast iron weight. You could use a heavy pot or pan. I wrap it in just some paper towels, and I just let it sit here. Now, I did have this weighted down, this tofu block weighted down for about 20 minutes prior to jumping on here. So I was able to get quite a bit of the moisture and the water out of it. So if you can think a little bit ahead, to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and turn my burners on to about medium high. So if you can think ahead to do that, that would be great. Because again, you just probably do want to press it. If you do the extra firm, maybe not needing to press it quite so long. All right, so I just wanted to let you know that you can press it in a clean dishcloth. I had to change out those paper towels a couple of times because there was quite a bit of water coming out. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the tofu and we're going to just cut it into about 1/2 inch or so thick rectangle shape. So about like that. All right, so we're just going to cut it into a rectangle. Now you could cube this as well if you wanted to. You could tear it, and just like we talked about last week, into bite-sized pieces. I'm actually just going to, I wanted to do the rectangle shape because I want to, I think it'll just cooks a little bit faster, because if you're doing cubes, then you kind of have to brown all 4 sides and keep turning it. But this way we only have to do 2 sides to flip it as far as searing it. All right, I do have a 2-burner griddle here. As I'm thinking about this, it probably would have been better for me to do it in my round non-stick skillet, because that'll help to create the glaze and kind of keep it all contained in a smaller surface area. It's going to spread out a little bit here, but I wanted to just do this all at one time, and I didn't think they'd fit in my skillet. It wasn't quite big enough. So I'm going to do it on this this griddle. I am going to use some peanut oil, and that's what we're going to use to sort of just oil up our grill. About 1 or 2 tablespoons here. If you're probably doing it in a smaller skillet, you probably only need 1. This is a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go ahead and use 2. I'm using peanut oil because I like peanut oil. It's a monounsaturated fat, heart healthy, similar to olive oil, but peanut oil just takes a higher heat, won't smoke as quickly. So if I'm trying to get something kind of browned or stir frying, I'll often just jump over to my peanut oil rather than olive oil, but you certainly can do both. And I'm just going to sort of spread this out a little bit. So you kind of want your surface to be pretty hot before you put your tofu on it. All right, so we have it. Now we're just going to I'm going to add the tofu gently, because we obviously, ideally don't want to break this up. I'm just going to put it in a bowl, because we're going to use this bowl for the glaze as well. But we're going to just dust it with some cornstarch. And you could use potato starch, about a quarter teaspoon or so, or a quarter of a cup. You could use potato starch, rice starch, cornstarch. I typically have cornstarch, so that's what I'm using. Flour, you could, I think the cornstarch is quite frankly a little bit better. I have found that cornstarch gives it more of a crunchier like texture when you're trying to sear it, when you're trying to pan sear it. So I just sprinkled it over top. I'm just gonna gently sort of toss it around in here. And the other thing with the tofu, with the cornstarch, is the idea here is that we're going to use the cornstarch then, the remnants of the cornstarch here, to help us thicken the glaze. Because the idea behind this is we do want a sticky glaze, right? So in order for it to be kind of sticky, it has to thicken up a little bit, and the cornstarch will do that for us. All right, so I'm just taking this and I'm just trying to coat all four sides with it as best you can, or well, two sides, but also I'm getting it on the edges. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on here. I'm hearing a little bit of a sizzle. Could be probably a little bit hotter. Let me turn this up just a little bit. All right, so you just can trying to get these right over where the heat is really hitting the bottom of this griddle. All right. Now you could, in other recipes when I'm doing this, I will often season the flour or the cornstarch with maybe, garlic powder, onion powder, maybe even some dried herbs or something. But we don't really need to do that so much with this because the glaze is pretty flavorful. So, we're just coating this so that we can get a pretty good crunch on the tofu. All right. So I don't really need it to be super flavorful, the coating that we're dusting this with. All right, let me see if I can get this on here. All right. All right, so that's on. I have it up probably medium high. I'm going to pump it up a little bit more here. All right, and then let me wash my hands. So while that's cooking, it's going to take maybe 3 or 4 minutes per side. I'm going to dump out a little bit of this cornstarch. I don't want all of it at the bottom, but it's okay. So we're just going to reuse this bowl to make our glaze. All right. All right. So glaze is really simple. Probably have everything in your pantry if you're doing any kind of Asian sort of inspired dinners. All right. So I'm going to start with about 1/3 cup of water. And then we're adding 1.5 tablespoons of soy sauce. I'm using tamari. It's a little bit lower sodium. It's up to you. You don't need to, but I tend to cook a little less salt. All right, 1.5 teaspoons of our soy sauce. And then we're going to do about 1 tablespoon of the hoisin sauce, which, gives it a lot of nice flavor, just a little slight sweetness to it. But not too much, more just a pretty intense, nice flavor. Then a little bit of honey. I'm just going to do, I think the recipe calls for, about 1 tablespoon. I'm not going to do a full tablespoon because the hoisin's a little bit sweet. I don't want this overly sweet, so I'm going to do a little less than 1 tablespoon, I think, of the honey, whatever honey you have, and then just 1/2 tablespoon of sesame oil. All right. And then the final ingredient is just some rice wine vinegar, ideally sort of unseasoned rice wine vinegar. Seasoned rice wine is going to have sugar and salt, so it's about 2 teaspoons. So I'm using my tablespoons. So that's probably about 3/4 of the tablespoon here. All right. All right. So here's the glaze. So just take a little whisk, and I'm just going to incorporate some of that cornstarch that was in there. Well, actually, all of it that's in there. All right, and then we're just going to whisk it around. And then this is what we're going to pour. Now, I'm going to try my best, because like I said, I probably should have used my nonstick skillet as I thought about this after the fact, because then when you pour the glaze over it, it's a lot easier for it to thicken up, because it's all, like I said, it's all in one pan with a side to it. So let me see if I'll try to pull these a little bit closer together when we go to pour that on. All right, so let's just take a peek and see if these are browning up. Not quite yet. Probably didn't have this quite hot enough before let me crank it up even more, get this going. All right, so if you did not join us last week, so as far as tofu goes, we're talking about using tofu as a sort of a plant-based alternative for protein, and soybeans are an excellent source of protein. They contain all 9 essential amino acids, which is very unusual for a plant-based source of protein. This tofu in about 3 ounces, just probably maybe 2 of these rectangles, is around 9 to 10 grams of protein. So it's a pretty good dose there. And it's also a nice little source of iron and calcium, because that is, it's just iron just naturally in soybeans, and then the calcium sort of comes from the water bath that the tofu is housed in its container. So that's really nice. And then you can use tofu, whether it's extra firm or firm. We'll talk about silk in a little bit different, because that's kind of, it's a little more unique in how you would use it. But whether it's the, firm or extra firm. All right, let me just flip this over a little bit. Starting to get a little bit of a crunch. I can feel it's very crunchy. Not getting it searing as much, but I don't want to set my soy smoke detector off. So I'm going to go ahead and just flip these. All right, they're browning up. They could probably go just another minute or two, but and the risk of me setting off any kind of smoke detector. All right, I'm going to put these a little bit closer together so that when we do the sticky glaze, I'm going to bring them down here. I'm going to turn my burner off the upper end. I'm just going to keep this one on down here. All right, so I'll let them continue to brown. So with the extra firm and the firm tofu, you can do a lot of different things with it. You can crumble it up like we did last week to make an egg salad. You could also crumble it up and put it in a pan with onions and peppers and mushrooms and create like your own little eggo scramble. You could also shred it. Now that I've only done once, and I've just found a recipe that makes me want to try it again, because you can take this block of tofu, shred it on a shredder with the largest holes. Then you can season it, maybe with, I don't know, paprika, or garlic powder, ginger powder, with just some powdered spices, and then toss it together. Then you put it on a sheet pan, and you bake it in the oven for 20 minutes or so, and it dries it out a little bit, so you have this shredded tofu spread out on this pan, and it gets fairly chewy. I haven't tried it, but according to the recipe I'm reading, I think it would really work. Then, if you wanted to turn it into like let's say like a barbecued tofu, so it almost would be like pulled pork, then you could add that back to a saucepan with some barbecue sauce and maybe a little bit of water to thin it down, and cook it in that. And it supposedly will create the texture of ground beef in a way, or pulled pork, and I think it would. The only other way I did it with shredded tofu is I sautéed it on in a skillet, and it was good. I just couldn't get it brown enough. It seemed to steam more than it did browned. But I think if you did it in the oven, I think it would be great. So shredding it, cubing it. I got it nice and hot now. Shredding it, cubing it, cutting it into rectangles like we're doing here. All right. So now you can see this. I think you can. Let me pull this out of the way. It is really bubbling up and really getting thick. This is our sticky glaze. Let's turn it down a little bit. And like I said, I think that I would recommend doing this in a skillet rather than on a griddle surface, but it's working. So it's really bubbling up, and because of the cornstarch in here, it's really helping to get this nice and thick. So I'm going to flip these over. All right. Oh, it smells so good. You can smell the hoisin sauce on it. Let me just flip it over, and it is very crunchy. I mean, the texture is firm, and I can tell that it has created a nice little crust from just the browning here in the pan. All right, so we'll get this together. Let me just put some sauce on here. And the sauce is super nice and thick. All right, so I'm gonna, and that's about it. That's it. This is it. This is this pan-seared sticky tofu. Super easy, super fast, and really good. Because this is, if you've got someone who's kind of not a big fan of tofu, or I would say tofu suspicious, this would be what I would recommend. I'm going to take it off heat now because it has such intense flavor, and the texture of the tofu, nice and firm, and I'll show it to you here in a minute. Let me pull it off. And then the glaze, very flavorful. All right, so let me take a few of these off so I can show it to you. And then the way I would serve this, let me just get one more on here. The way I would serve this would be, I would just take some, I'm going to pull this off heat a little bit. I would take some sesame seeds and sprinkle those on top. And then, I just happen to have, I always have scallions in my refrigerator, so I chopped up a few of those. Then I would just take some scallions and just sprinkle those on top. And here's our sticky glazed, pan-seared, sticky glazed tofu. And let me grab a fork here and I'll just show you that when you kind of, let me see if I can get it going here. It's so hot, I take a bite of it, but it just seems so hot. What's great about it is that I can't get my fork through this because the crispy the outside of the tofu has got really nice and crispy from the cornstarch and when we were pan-searing it. So you do have to kind of work through it to get through it, which is what you want. You really want, the texture. And again, it's not chicken. I hate when we compare it to chicken. That's not what we're going for. It's tofu. But it has a really nice, like meaty texture if you really are looking for that in your plant type of protein. So this is actually one of my favorites. It's super, super easy, as you can say. You can cube it up and put it in lettuce wraps. You can have it obviously over some brown rice. You could just eat it as is and just do it over maybe some sauteed spinach or even some bok choy would be delicious. Super easy, only a few ingredients. Most likely you have them all in your pantry. Please give it a try. We will probably be doing another tofu recipe because I really want to talk about silken tofu. I just think that's such a beautiful texture and there's so many fun ways you can use it. You can do savory with silken, you can go desserts with silken, it can go in your smoothie. So I'd like to do one more tofu recipe focusing on the texture of silken tofu. So we'll try to get to that to you over maybe the next couple of weeks. So stay healthy until the next time we meet. Always reach out to Athens Nutrition for our nutrition tips and advice. Our dietitians are always available to help you out. If you'd like to schedule an appointment with one of us, we'd be happy to help you get set up on a healthier eating plan. All right, stay well till next week. Bye-bye.